I, I saw new names here. So good evening, everyone. So nice to have you all back. So we are continuing the chapter 23 of the book Astral City. So I'll start from the beginning, so that will give a bit of continuum. The art of listening. I could not help feeling sorry that our talk was interrupted, for Laura's elucidation were most stimulating. Lysias had come back in evident good spirit. Hello, haven't you retired yet? He asked with a smile. With the two young men took their leave, he invited me cordially to come down to the garden. Just to give a bit of information, this book is the Astral City, where Andre Luiz, a doctor, after he passed away, he started to report what he found on the other side. There are things like we just read here, like garden, a few other things that as we go along, we will ask your attention as well. But we also mentioned about that before. You haven't seen the moonlight from this side of town, he said. So he mentioned about garden. We now had a word called town, and we were talking about moonlight. So it is bringing to us that on the other side is pretty much look alike what we have here. While Laura talked with her daughters, I followed Lysias into the garden. It was really a magnificent sight. Accustomed as I was to the hospital grounds, which were secluded among large trees, I had not yet had the opportunity to contemplate the wonderful spectacle of a moonlight night from the spacious quarters, gloxonias, I don't know what the word means, of Ministry of Assistance. Exquisitely colored gloxonias enhanced the beauty of the scenery and provided a vivid background for fragrant snow white lilies. Oh, they're talking about flowers, which were slightly tinged with blue at the base of the cups. So we have now a little bit of information about flowers in the spiritual world. I drew a deep breath, feeling a wave of new energy fill my whole being. In the distance rose to the tower of the government house, bathed with beautiful display of lights. I was hushed into administration, and only after some time did I manage to speak at all. So if any of you want to jump in, make questions or anything, please feel free to do so, right? What a night. I have never experienced such a peace. Lysias smiled and explained. All the well-balanced inhabitants of the colony have pledged to avoid emitting negative currents of thoughts. Let me stop here a little bit. Science in the recent past started to understand a little bit better the currents of thoughts, right? I'm trying to remember the name of the Japanese that made some tests. Masaru Emoto. He made a compelling study about energy, power of thoughts, how that would change the environment, the water, the food, and things like that. If you never had the curiosity to read about it, it's pretty clever what he did. It's pretty interesting. So his name again is Masaru Emoto. Thus, the effort of the majority merges into an almost continual prayer, hence the atmosphere of peace all around us. For some time, we gazed in wonder at the soul-stirring scenery, trying to absorb the night's opalescent light and soothing calm. Then we returned to the living room, where Lysias approached a small radio-like apparatus. As you know by now, I like to get your attention to things that the great majority of people believe that do not exist on the spiritual world, even the Spiritists. Because when we read something like that, we like to read just what is important to us or just what is romantic to us. So we discuss about electricity, we discuss about constructions, we discuss about a few other things already. And here he is mentioned something like a radio light. So what we use a radio for other than to communicate? Then I have a problem if I start to say, no, this is not possible, because then I'm telling that the medium that is by far the most renowned medium in Brazil, and the spirit, and the coordinator of the book as well, saying that they are not right, or they are lying, or they are pretending to have something that does not exist. So I have no reason not to believe they do not exist. But if I do need an equipment such as a radio, means that that theory that every spirit can do everything by thought, by mind, is not really true. I'm very happy to accept that a high evolved spirit may be the case. The people like me, when I'm going over there, oh, I need my iPhone with me, because without my iPhone, I'm no one. So I do not expect to arrive on the other side and be able to be flying and do magics, because magic do not exist. So I think it was in the very last week, we discussed about drugs, about medicines that were required to treat patients. We discussed about equipment, and this book is full of information like that. But the great majority of people, when you read this book, do not pay attention to the little details. That is something that I really like. So that's why I always try to bring to your attention things like that, things that may shock your perception, and things that will tell you that you read only a few times the book. You need to read again. Because as we read again, we start to find those pearls into the book. My curiosity was instantly aroused, and I wondered what we were going to hear. Message from Earth? My kind friend, reading my thoughts, explained, we aren't going to hear any voices from the planet. Our broadcasts here are based on vibration currents far more subtle than those on Earth. So look at what he says here. Broadcast. What do we need to broadcast something? We need technology. We need equipment. We need electricity. And he also gave us here the information already about vibratory currents that we also use on Earth. So that's really, I think is wonderful, really. But there are no means, I inquired, of picking up broadcasts from Earth. Of course there are. And they do it in all the ministries. But in our homes, we must concern ourselves only with our present condition and activities. Let me stop here a little bit. Now we know that they also have equipment capable to pick up all signals from Earth, right? Chico Xavier, the very same medium that wrote this book, he said once that one day we will be able to communicate from Earth to the spiritual world using an equipment such as a TV or radio. I forgot the 3 letters that we call that, the VEP, or, well, I won't remember now, but basically, there are people that study and maintain some communication with the spiritual world using equipment. Voice phenomena, VOP, voice over phenomena is this how they call it. And they basically, they were able to establish communication already with the spiritual world. But of course, science do not want that to be broadcasted in a way. And a lot of people do not believe. But it is happening. There are enough books already to those that want to find about it. And I had a contact with another medium that she's already on the spiritual world now. And she said to me at the time that her benefactor told clearly that one day we would be able to interact with the spiritual world like we interact ourselves today. And I truly believe the system we are using today, like Zoom or Gmail, Google Meeting, things like that, is already preparing us to achieve something like that. Because here we are spread around the world. There are people from different countries, different cities, different areas. So we are already, to a certain extent, communicating from distance. So possibly one day that may happen as well between here and there. After all, the work programs in different departments are tiding from higher spheres, and lofty teachings are much more important to us than any earthly problems. Yeah, that's very true. I don't think that when I move away from here, I want to be thinking about problems that I left behind. We may do, and we know a lot of spirits do because of the mediumship meetings, but I rather prefer to think that myself, the day I move on, I will not be tied to my earthly problems, because that will be a burden to bring in my backpack. The remark was just, but still bound by domestic ties, I insisted. Do you really think so? What about our relatives left behind, our parents, our children's? Our perception about family has to evolve. What we consider as a family today is my wife, my husband, my parents, my kids, and that's it. But they are our family today. What about families from the past? How many times we had existed on Earth or any other place? How many times we had different families? So the concept of universal family is not easy to contemplate, but eventually is something that we should all try to exercise, because we are here today. I don't know if we had any family ties before. I cannot tell. Perhaps we did. And when we move to the other side, our family is here, but perhaps my other family is there waiting for me. So we need to thinking a bit differently about family. I was expecting that question. You see, my friend, on the material plane, we often misinterpret situations. Most of us suffer from emotional hypertrophy. And that's very common, because we are possessive beings. Is my wife, is my husband, is my son. I will not accept to be left behind, or I do not accept to move away because they are mine. This is not like that. We are not property of anyone. And then we increase their emotional ties to the level they're becoming a disease that could become an obsession, like we were studying before. So we need to learn how to control better our emotions, because eventually we're all going to die. So it's better to get prepared earlier than later. There on earth, we are slaves of exclusivism and inclined to limit our family to those bound to us by bloody ties. We go through life heedless of the true principles of brotherhood. And although we preach them to everyone, when it comes to putting our beliefs into practice, nothing counts but our own flesh and blood. Let me stop here. Beliefs into practice. This is something very, very important. We talk about a lot of things. We preach a lot of things. But when the times come to show that we really believe things, we demonstrate that we only believe things. I think we need to pass that point that we believe on things. The day we start to say that I know is different than the day I say I believe. I believe in a lot of things, but there are things that I know. I don't remember if I mentioned that here already, but sometimes when people ask me, Gil, do you believe in spirits? My answer is no, I don't believe in spirits. I know them. I know they exist. I know they are real. It's different. But how could you know? Well, I'm dealing with them every day. Meetings, works, projects, you name it. If I do not believe that, if I don't know them, if I'm still keeping my I believe them, means that I don't really know what's going on. So I think we all have to evolve eventually from belief to know. Here, however, life presents a different aspect. We have to conquer our old wickedness and rectify injustices. That's normal, here and there. We evolve in both sides of life, on earth, on the spiritual world. So we have to conquer our old self, our old man that we are. And how can we do that? Step by step. No one will become saint in a couple of days. But we can be better tomorrow than we are today. We are told that in the early days of the colony, every home possessed the necessary equipment to pick up broadcasts from the physical sphere. Ooh. I never noticed that before. So they had the freedom to see what was happening on earth at that time when the spiritual city of Astral City was founded. But I see problems with that. Everybody insisted on hearing news on his earthly relations, so that from the ministry of regeneration to that of the elevation, the city inhabitants lived with their nerves on the edge. Yeah, I bet. Disturbing rumors interfered with the good order of activities in general. Sometimes, whole families were thrown into a state of utter confusion because of bad tidings from their dear ones still on earth. When collective catastrophes on earth in any way affected those lodged in the colony, they assumed the proportion of public calamities. According to our records, the city was more like a purgatorial zone than the place of rest and instruction it was meant to be. I think it's easy to understand, right? Hi, Elsa, I see your hands. Yeah.
Guilherme, I'm thinking how important for people to maintain the mind cool in any situation. For example, now, if you ask a family that has no shelter between wars in Ukraine, for example, even if they have all the knowledge about religion or faith, etc., it's difficult for them to maintain their mind in peace. Yeah. So the entire families are here and there, because in this spiritual world, the families of the beloved ones that are under this atrocity war, in our position, our eyes right now, we know that everything has a cause and consequences. No one is a victim in this planet, etc., here and there, but it's really, really affected us. I take my own experience these days that I'm in turbulent waters, etc., how difficult it is to concentrate, to think about it, be calm, be gentle, deep breath, etc. So it's disturbing is in my mind, but I try really to be in peace in order to deal with each situation one by one. No?
You said several important things, Elsa. Let me go first for the one in the war. To those that are leaving the war, it's hard to even comprehend how they can go through it. But to those that are not in the war zone and were affected by the war, because we saw that, people desperate in Europe, people wanting to leave Europe, people with fear, a lot of people with fear. We did not help them at all. We were affected by what they were leaving. I'm not saying that we should not pray for them, we should not be concerned about them. But like what has happened during the pandemic, we had so much fear around the world. It did not help at all. It created an atmosphere of fear. And if we were a bit more positive, perhaps we could have had better results. Perhaps. The other thing that, Elsa, that you mentioned is very important. If we want to help someone, we should not go deeper into the problem. If I'm going deeper into the problem, I lose the ability to help the person or the family or whoever needs help. It's like in the industry. We have supervisors. Why we have supervisors? Because they are away from the day-to-day thing, and they have a vision that could help the workers with his experience, his knowledge. That's why he was promoted to supervisor. If the supervisor goes to the level of workers and start to do the work with the team, you lost the supervision. So when we try to help someone, sometimes it's very, very hard, but we should think about it. We should not be evolved. Sorry, not evolved. We should not be so deep into the problem, because we will lose our ability to see beyond the problem and to help the situation. It's very difficult, but we should think about it. The late governor was perhaps a little too tolerant, and as you know, indiscriminate kindness engenders indiscipline and failure. Okay. But when we read something like that here, we need to be very careful. We need to find balance on everything in life. People that have a tendency to be dictators, they may find here the perfect excuse to be one. So we need to be careful what we read and compare with what we want. I think balance is the word. But 2 centuries ago, of the devoted ministry of the Divine Union urged the governor to change that deplorable situation. Supported by the ministry, the governor forbade the widespread communications with Earth. There is something here that is knocking my head here now. They had the bloody technology when the city was founded, was created. Who else in our history also forbidden people to communicate with the spirits? Here we see a kind of policy put in place to prevent everyone to communicate Earth anytime. But we also had someone on Earth trying to prevent that to happen from Earth to the spiritual world. I think his name was Moses, the first one who tried to prevent that. In the more recent times, we had other religions, other beliefs trying to put a buffer into that possibility too. Even on the Spiritism, because there are people that believe that mediumship meetings are just for a clique of people, just for a minimum number of people. To be someone to consider to go to the mediumship meeting, I need to go to a university, to a Spiritist university, study there for 20 years, and pray that someone from that meeting dies so I can have a chair in that meeting. So why I'm saying that? Because it's natural on the human being trying to protect what they fear, trying to protect what they do not control entirely. And here in that case in the book, we understand the possibility of a communication between each family on the spiritual world with the family on Earth. Just see what is happening, not to having a direct communication, was creating a mess. Why? Because we are emotional creatures. For example, I will die tomorrow, hope not, but I'll die tomorrow, and then I will leave behind my wife, my 2 kids. And because they are very young, I know they're going to do something stupid because it's part of the age. Imagine if I'm following them every day. And every time they do something that I don't agree or I think is stupid, I start to feel itching my spiritual body because I cannot do anything. I can see, but I cannot interact. I can see, but I cannot change anything. I think that could be very painful. There was great opposition, but the generous minister who had introduced the measure called to witness Jesus' teachings. Let the dead bury their dead. And in a short time, the innovation was successfully implemented. How often we see on a mediumship meeting a spirit coming, complaining because he is still tied to the families in the property, and they are there. They need help to move on because they realize they are attached to the beings on Earth, and that's not doing any good for himself or herself, nor for the family. But sometimes they stay attached for years, decades. But we also have on the mediumship meetings spirits that are coming complaining because, for example, the mother never accept the death of the son, and is sending him thoughts every single day, and those thoughts are giving him trouble. So the power of thought again. Still, I insisted it would be most comforting to have news of our dear ones on earth. Wouldn't we feel more at rest? Lysias, who had been standing by the receiver without turning it on, continued his explanation. Now, take yourself as an example to see whether that would be wise. Would you be prepared, for instance, to hear that a beloved son was maligning another or being malignant himself? Would you maintain the necessary serenity, awaiting with faith and acting in accordance with the divine precepts? If someone informed you that one of your brothers had just been imprisoned as a criminal, would you be strong enough to keep calm? I smiled disappointedly. We shouldn't try to look for news from lower spheres. We shouldn't try to look for news from lower spheres. Let's elaborate a bit here. We are talking about spirits that are not yet comfortable with the new scenario on the spiritual world. Are spirits that are working hard to be better prepared in the spiritual world. So then, any information that may come from the loved ones, even the positive ones, could create harm. I'm missing my family because they are not here. They are in vacation elsewhere, and that's for like a month. Imagine if I'm there for like years. That feeling will be way more stronger than just a month away. Even if I receive good news from them, perhaps that will not help me to keep my balance. That is entirely different than a spirit who has achieved a level of instructions of serenity, coming even to earth to help others. So we have the two scenarios. Lysias continued obligingly, except when we are able to render a just service. We must always keep in mind that no one can help justly and efficiently when under emotional, mental distress. And that goes in line with what I said about the supervisor and the team, right? If we are emotionally affected by what is happening, we lose the potential to help. Instead of help, we'll need help because we became part of the problem, not the solution for the problem. When I'm in my work, I'm working with robotics, right? So there's a lot of things to think about it. And when we are trying to troubleshoot something for an hour and a half, and no one can figure out what is going on, I used to say, stop everyone. Tea time. Well, tea time. This is not a question. Tea time. Let's have a tea. Let's giggle. Let's do something to take our mind away from that problem. Then we go back. If that does not work, give another hour or so, stop everything, tea time again. Talking about 5 to 10 minutes. But now we're going to do something different. We will return the robot to the very same status he had when we had a problem. And we'll start everything again with a different pair of eyes, with a different perspective. Because when we are so deeply involved in any problem, we lose that perspective. It's very easy to anyone to lose that possibility to find a problem and to repair. So we have to go through suitable preparation before risking any new contact with our earthly relations. If they offered an adequate field for spiritual love, the exchange would be worthwhile. But unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of incarnate people has not yet attained even a moderate degree of self-control. Well, I think he was very generous here. I think that he could say 99.99% of the population did not achieve that level of self-control. Most of them lead haphazard lives, drifting with the high and low tides of the material conditions. In spite of our sentiments, we must avoid being drawn into low vibratory spheres. We should. Giving evidence of my stubbornness, I still argue the point. But Lysias, your father is back on Earth. Wouldn't you like to communicate with him? Of course, he answered kindly. Whenever we deserve the joy and the contact between us is considered opportune, we visit him in his new physical body, but we mustn't forget that we are fallible creatures and as such should refer to the competent department and let them decide about the opportunity and merit of such visits. Of course, we want to see the loved ones. I would like to see my loved ones on the other side. Likewise, the way I'm there, I would like to see my loved ones here. But perhaps it's better to rely on those that have a better experience than mine to tell me if that would be positive for myself or for those I love. That specialized work is done by the Ministry of Communication. Besides, it's well remembered that although it is easier to descend from a higher to the lower sphere than the other way around, there are certain principles regulating communication between the different spheres that must be taken into consideration. Organization is everything, right? Principles, regulating. Yeah.
Guilherme,
yep.
I am thinking here right now, the situation that once you are in the spiritual world, you not settle your mind there, you want to see people here. Once you are here, you want to see people there. But it's a little bit complication when we insist, as in this case, the father of Andre Luiz was born again, reincarnated in a physical body. How can he comes and see the small child? Oh, this is my father, perhaps with a problem with the limbs or certain disease, etc., can be a shock for ourselves, for example, no? If you have someone that you love so much, but was in prison for a long time and died in the prison and passed away, you want to know about him, and perhaps the person there wants to know about you here. And this confusion that Andre Luiz described, Lysias described very well here, in the other situations, make me think about, once you are here, you have to settle your mind here, pray for your beloved ones, but not insist going here and there, wants a message, wants this and there, because this can cause perturbation to the ones that are the other side. No, what do you think?
It does happen. It does happen, and quite often. We try to justify our need to have that contact, but on the end of the day, we create more harm than anything else, because they are humans too. They have the same feeling for us. And there are some situations that we believe that everyone we love is quite well, isn't it? That may not be that well. And our presence, or even our thoughts, if are not balanced enough, instead of help, can create harm. So ideally, the best thing is to let them live their lives and let us live our lives here, or vice versa, because there are so many things we don't know. And the way we see the spirits telling us in the mediumship meetings.
We have many fathers and mothers spiritual world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's better not to focus on that. It's better to focus in our own situation, to focus in our own evolution. Because if we evolve, we'll help them. But if we stagnate, it's a lose-lose situation.
I'd like to know if Dr. Dani knows the book Nosso Lar, Astral City. Okay, wonderful. Chico Xavier, tomorrow, 9 p.m., we will have a live broadcasting with Geraldinho. Sorry that I'm interrupting, but Geraldinho, he will talk about the Chico Xavier life, okay? Tomorrow, 9 p.m. Thank you, Guilherme.
My pleasure. They tell us that total understanding of those still in the lower zones is essential to render them adequate help. It's just as important to know how to speak as to know how to listen. I need to learn that. I'm speaking too much. This colony was in a constant state of unrest because its inhabitants, not knowing how to listen, were unable to help efficiently. Thus, the spiritual atmosphere here was often sadly impaired. What came to my mind here is that sometimes in the mediumship meeting, the indoctrinators, they talk too much. They don't even let the spirits say what they have as a problem. They don't let the spirits say what they are here for. And because the person's trying to help, sometimes he forgets that it's better listen first. And then you can elaborate the best line of action. But if you don't know what is this spirit or this person problem, how can you help? Difficult. At those irrefutable arguments, I lapsed into a brooding silence, while Lysias turned into a receiver under my watchful eye. Very interesting, very interesting. You see, I'm pretty sure that most of us, when we read this book for the first, second, third time, we would not pay attention about things like radios, communications, things like that. But it seems a reality. What time is it? I'm talking, but they're not paying attention on time. So we still have 15 minutes. So I'll move into the next chapter. Reminding everyone that if you want to say anything, you want to ask anything, please feel free to open your mic and jump in, right? Because otherwise it looks like more like a audiobook than anything else. I would like to talk, I would like to discuss, to chat with you guys. Chapter 24, A Soul Steering Uphill. Soft music floated into the room. just as I like to remind, if you do have music, how can we generate music? With instruments. How can we send music into a room? With equipment, right? Suiting us with its melodious cadence, while on the screen we saw the announcer of his studio. In a few moments, hold on. What is an announcer studio for us? He almost said there was a DJ here, right? We have music, and now we have an announcer in the studio that, to make an easy understanding, could be a polite DJ bringing nice music to people. In a few moments, he began to speak. This is Station 2 residence. Our colony continues to broadcast its appeal for peace on Earth. As we move along the book, we will see other colonies like Astral City. Residence is one of them. Campus Paz, Peace Camps is another one. It's way further. So Astral City is one of many places spirits gather. We urge all workers of goodwill to muster their energy to help maintain the moral balance on Earth. Imagine the amount of work we gave those spirits, our benefactors, during the high peak of pandemic. Imagine how much trouble we have created with our energy of fear. Imagine that. Please, all who can spare a few hours to cooperate in the border zones that connect the dark forces of the lower zone to the human mind, help us. How can I explain that here? We have layers, even geological layers in our planet, but we have energetic layers in our planet where each type of spirit is drawn by his own vibration into that area. And he is telling us that he was asking help to create like a shield between the lower zone, not to affect too much that vibration that the humans, the earthly creatures were creating already. Because we create those vibrations with our thoughts. We don't need help from more dense energies into us to make things worse, right? Dark bands of ignorance entities, after having left a bloody trail of war in Asia, are laying siege to the European nations. Of war in Asia are laying siege in European nations. He's telling us here that some bellic spirits, if I can call them like that, spirits that have fun with war, they like to have war, that's their life. They moved from a place to another. They had left a conflict situation in Asia and they were drawn into Europe for the Second World War, urging them to new crimes. Our colony, together with all those dedicated to the work of spiritual hygiene in the spheres nearest to the earth, denounce this onset of concentrated powers of evil and request broadly collaboration on all possible help
Guilherme,
Yep.
quickly thing that I'm thinking again. We see one can say why God permitted these ignorant spirits. That is really lower classification of spirits that they are happy with doing these kind of things, they're instigating murders, wars, etc., etc. And we know that the benefactors, they do not interrupt in this free will. But such a point that comes that there's no need, this vengeance from these spirits or instigation, the benefactors can interfere and stop them, isn't it?
My understanding of free will is that free will is limited. We can only exercise our free will until a certain point. Even those spirits described here, when they committed atrocities or they give the incentive to incarnate people to commit atrocities, nothing is lost. We have to bring into the scenario the law of cause and effect, the karma. If that is a requirement for that particular area of the globe to have that experience, to purge what they have done, to learn what they could do better, then they will have granted a pass to do what they are describing here. But if it's coming to a point where that's no longer required, it is coming to a point that is above what that population or what that individual needs, then the free will of those entities will also be limited. Because we can only affect others people's free will to the limit of ours. And as ever, we have our benefactors, we have God, the higher spirits, always surveying what is happening. If they have to interfere, they will, with a higher permission. I don't remember how many times anymore I was told by our spiritual friends that they will do whatever is necessary and permitted by God. Sometimes the suffering is required. The suffering is required to allow us to grow as individual, as a nation, as a race. But when we are suffering, yeah, go on.
I'm thinking about the groups that are praying together for cleanse the world, to help these ignorant spirits to go to the light, to change their minds, because they are obsessing, not only instigating wars, but obsessing politicians. They are really complies in this situation. And we could be the ones that are being calling with good energy to help maintain the moral balance on our planet. We know that the benefactors constantly asking us prayer, prayer with good heart, really with good intention. So this energy will do a barrier, protection to our planet and help the people open their minds, their eyes, in order to see what we read in the first part of SSL today, the protection, respect each one, without this ambition to have more, without thinking in balance in the planet. So I do, but I know that importance to pray, and I strongly believe in the power of prayer. I do.
This is something that we all can do. If everyone do his bit, things will be better. Things will be better.
About 4 minutes to go now, I guess.
Yeah, I will stop here. And I'm just finish the sentence here. Remember that the cause of peace needs defenders. Join and cooperate with us to the best of your abilities. There is work for everyone, from the regions of the earth to our very gates. May Lord bless us all.
Beautiful.
There are possibilities to all of us to work, to do good. Don't need to be a spiritist, don't need to be anything. Just help one another. That's what matters really. So I'm ending my conversation here today. I thank you all very much for your participation. You could have talked a little bit more, but I'm glad with that already. So I'm looking forward to see you all in 2 weeks' time.
I will.